Sacrifice is a 2000 third-person RTS hybrid developed by Shiny Entertainment. You might know them as the studio behind the excellent Earthworm Jim and the, decent Enter the Matrix and Path of Neo. I played them when I was a kid, I remember liking them. Sacrifice received almost universal acclaim at release, and was lauded for being the first game to truly make full use of the then brand new GeForce 2 and Radeon series graphics cards. It was also praised for its successful third-person RTS hybrid. Sadly, much like its spiritual cousin, Giant Citizen Kabuto, Sacrifice was a commercial failure, and would be Shiny Entertainment's last attempt at creative game development. I call them spiritual cousins because these two games are often grouped together and there's a sizable overlap between their fan bases. Moreover, they both occupy the same niche, but in very different ways. Giant Citizen Kabuto is a third-person game with RTS elements like base building and resource management, while Sacrifice is an RTS in a third-person perspective, but with little to no base building and resource mechanics and an emphasis on micromanagement. I'd like to see someone compare them side by side. It would make for an interesting Venn diagram. Anyway, let's talk fixes. Sacrifice is an old game, so you won't be able to make it work out of the box. For that, you'll need to get Voodoo Wrapper. I'm not gonna waste your time by explaining the whole process, so I'll leave a set of instructions in the description of this video. One more thing. Framerate. Any number above 60 causes enemies to become passive. It's due to something related to how the game and animations were coded. I don't know. I solved it by capping the framerate at 50 in system registry. I'll also explain that whole thing in the description, so make sure to check it out. Also, per the orders of the algorithm gods, I'm bound to encourage everybody watching this to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'm also on Twitter where I talk nonsense about 90s hip-hop. Okay, let's get into the video.
Blah 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 blah.
Sacrifice's story begins with a meeting between the protagonist, Eldred, and Mithras, a blind seer. The gist of the premise is that Eldred was a piece of shit tyrannical emperor who ruled over the world of Jera. After seeing that his subjects were getting a bit too rebellious for his own tastes and his enemies were ready to exploit the expanding power vacuum in his empire, he made a pact with a demon called Marduk to stabilize his realm. In a turn of events that surprised absolutely no one, Marduk proved uncontrollable and turned Jera into a post-apocalyptic shithole. Eldred, being the responsible and caring ruler that he is, fucked off to another world together with his buddy Mithras. The world that he fled to, having suffered a similar cataclysm, was split into 5 floating islands, each ruled by a god. While the 5 gods never got along in the first place, things get truly heated after Mithras reveals that there's a traitor amongst them, after which Eldred, always the shrewd and opportunistic boy, offers his services to the gods. Now here's the thing about the story. It might seem all doom and gloom from the outside, but in reality it doesn't take itself too seriously. In terms of tone, it has that same cheeky, self-aware vibe of Giant Citizen Kabuto. It knows when to be dramatic, but also when to take a step back and embrace the ridiculousness of its world. But we'll talk more about that later. For now, let's see how this game holds up in the presentation department. Believe it or not, Sacrifice was a real looker back in the day. The thing about these early 3D games is that most of them have aged like milk, while a small fraction of them have stood the test of time visually by virtue of their strong art direction. Fortunately, Sacrifice belongs to the latter category. Some elements like weather effects and terrain textures are dated, but the rest of the game is a joy to look at. The creature design is out of this world. In a 2001 article from Inside Mag Games, Michael Ehlers described the creature design as if Salvador Dali and H.R. Geiger got together and played around with 3D Studio Max for a few weeks with a cooler full of bass ale between them. So, I don't know about Salvador Dali, but there are definitely some H.R. Geiger influences in the monster design. Like, what is that? It has the coloring of a butterfly and the shape of a griffin. Or this. It looks like a minion that survived a nuclear disaster. Or this. I can't come up with any jokes, man. It just looks weird. All creatures follow pretty much the same design philosophy. Horrible abominations of nature that subvert any possible expectation that you could have about how a fantasy creature should look like. It's like they disassembled a bunch of stock fantasy creatures in a chop shop and put them back together haphazardly after being tipped off about an incoming police raid. The same degree of attention has been invested in other areas of the presentation. Again, Sacrifice was an outstanding technical achievement in 2000, and you can still see traces of that brilliance in the particle effects. Spells have this crunchy, weighty feel to them. When you cast a fireball, you genuinely feel like you're showing nature the finger and defying the laws of physics. Another thing Sacrifice has in common with Giant Citizen Kabuto, and I promise this is the last time I'm comparing them, is its high production values, especially in regards to its cutscenes and voice acting. I don't have anything interesting to say about the former, but I gotta admit I have a soft spot for old-timey in-engine cutscenes. Now, when it comes to the voice acting, the actors did a great job of capturing the essence of these gods. The 5 gods are sassy, larger-than-life beings, but at no point do the actors overact or phone it in. The acting has just enough camp to sell the idea that the gods are no more than narcissistic, self-centered buffoons, but not to the point where it could prevent players from taking them seriously. Like, as disarmingly clumsy as Charnel may be, he commands legions of Lovecraftian abominations. Trust me, you don't want to get on his bad side. You don't fuck with Charnel. Also, Shiny Entertainment hired a lot of talent for this game that you might recognize from other places. Let's have a listen.
I am Pyro, god of fire. They will tell you I am god of destruction and chaos, but that's not really true. I intend to build factories in the Davin Forest.
I am Charnel, god of strife, god of slaughter, god of death. Where there is pain, I am there. Where there is suffering, I flourish. Where there is joy, yes, well, one could hardly have joy without another's suffering, no?
I am James, god of earth. You know, rocks and soil and stuff. Some nice gems, too. Oh, it's not all brown and gray, you know. Just mostly. One of my altars has been abandoned, and I'd like to know why. Please go and see what you can see.
I am Stratos, god of air, and supreme lord of the heavens, bringer of storms, mover of the firmament. Oh, let's to be honest, shall we? In any halfway civilized world, I would be the only god.
We are Persephone. We are the essence of life. You have seen us in the sweet Virgin, the gentle mother, and the wise crone. Love us, and we shall requite thy love 100-fold.
The soundtrack, composed by Kevin Manfey of Wizardry 8, Killswitch, and Vampire the Masquerade Redemption fame, has some banger pieces which swing between whimsical and dark fantasy. It confers the game with a very distinct atmosphere, playing well into the dark fantasy/comedy vibe it goes for. So overall, Sacrifice holds up well in the presentation department. What impressed me the most was that Sacrifice understood how important it is to offer players solid audio feedback. Clicking on unit blobs and hearing your character yell Group 1, Group 2 and so on is a nice touch that makes the chaotic combat more manageable. It's the kind of thing that is unnoticeable when done right, but sticks out like a sore thumb when implemented badly. Which takes us to the gameplay.
Yes?
Sacrifice has 2 layers to its gameplay. A tactical layer, which is, you know, the combat, and a sort of bare-bones god relationship sim thingy. Let's start with the latter, because in my opinion this is the most interesting aspect of the gameplay. So, as I said before, Eldred offers his services to the 5 gods ruling over the world he was banished to. Persephone, the goddess of life, James, the god of earth, Stratos, the god of air, Pyro, the god of fire, industry, and presumably late-stage capitalism, and Charnel, the god of death and Morgoths. Now, these so-called gods are less omnipotent beings and more akin to petty school children. A large part of Sacrifice's comedy is based on the constant bickering between these assholes. I like to think that they've been stuck on this shitty planet for so long that they have nothing better to do than to scheme against each other out of sheer boredom. Each god will try to sway you toward their side and ideology, but look close enough and you'll see that they're just empty words. They're all petty fucking losers. Imagine an episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but 9 hours long and with gods. Holy shit, imagine Dennis becoming an actual god. I need that spin-off in my life. As Eldred, your job is to navigate this ever-expanding web of alliances and betrayals and push your own agenda. In this sense, Shiny Entertainment did something very interesting in that they've integrated the story component into the gameplay. The campaign has a non-linear structure in that you can take missions from each of the 5 gods in whatever order you like. Each god comes with 9 missions, amounting to a total of 45 missions. But there's a catch. A campaign spans 9 levels and only 1 mission for 1 god can be accessed per 1 level. So while there are 45 missions available, you'll be able to play only 9 of them during a single playthrough. Then there are the mission restrictions. As the campaign progresses, you will gain karma points with gods by either completing their respective missions or indirectly doing their bidding. You lose karma points by ignoring a god or working against them. Piss off a god too much and they refuse to give you a mission and tell you to fuck off. It's an interesting system that doesn't have a huge impact on the gameplay, but it does add some flavor to the story. And to be honest, most of your time will be spent battling legions of demonic critters. So let's talk about the combat. So what made Sacrifice stand out back in 2000 and even today to some degree is its unique action RTS blend. But unlike other RTS titles, Sacrifice has little to no base building elements. In Sacrifice you don't serve the double role of civil engineer and commander. You're a general and you serve more of a support role. One thing that I must address before delving deeper into the mechanics is that Sacrifice is a very micro-intensive game. Not on the level of Company of Heroes for example, but it's up there. Here's a piece of advice. See this list of hotkeys? Learn them. Write them down on a piece of paper and study them before bed. I didn't, and the first 3 missions were a nightmare as a result. So how does a standard mission play out? It's pretty straightforward. You're dropped into a map and you have to eliminate the opposing wizard. You have 2 resources to manage: souls and mana. Souls and mana are the currencies used to summon creatures. You collect souls by converting enemy or neutral souls to your side. Mana recharges via mana fountains, which you can conquer to your side by building mana lifts over them. Yeah, they're really called mana lifts. You eliminate enemy wizards by destroying their altars. To do that, you have to sacrifice one of your minions and protect your sack doctors from getting killed. The same rules apply to you. Dying is not game over, having your altar desecrated is. That pretty much covers the strategic and base building elements of the game, but there's more to it than meets the eye. Remember when I talked about the creature design earlier in the video? Well, those are fully summonable monsters that you can use to fulfill your demonic agenda. Or not, seems like Eldred had a change of heart, as if inadvertently destroying the world you were supposed to rule over makes you question your decisions. You know, I expected Eldred to be this basic evil wizard who's hellbent on conquering the world, but he's actually more complex than that. He's surprisingly self-aware and introspective. Maybe he read one of those self-help corporate management books and had an epiphany. Props to the writers, man, I did not expect this. Anyway, so, the combat. As I said before, Sacrifice is a very micro-intensive game. You'd think that a third-person perspective would make controlling legions of minions difficult, but Sacrifice is a textbook example of how UI and controls can make or break an experience. One of the first things the tutorial teaches you is assigning units to groups. You do that by double-clicking on a unit, which will automatically select all units of a given type, and pressing the control key followed by any number from 1 to 9. Forget about dragging the mouse, this should be your only way of selecting units. Anything other than that just takes too long and could result in you losing expensive units. A significant portion of the combat involves ordering units to perform specific tasks. You do so by navigating through a nifty pop-up menu. Think of it as your command center. You use it to order armies to assume formations or attack and defend areas. Usually I don't bother that much with this tactical stuff in games unless absolutely necessary, but Sacrifice taught me a stern lesson about the importance of formations. See, this isn't the kind of game where you can just build blobs of units and throw them at enemies. Each unit has a specific purpose in battle. For instance, mana whores are fast, non-combative support units that provide wizards and creatures with mana. They have high resistances, but they can still die pretty fast if the AI decides to focus on them for some reason. So you'll want them to stay out of the way and provide support for your armies. The best approach here is to arrange them in a phalanx formation and have them guard you. Summoned creatures are classified into 3 broad classes: melee, ranged, and flyers. The combat follows a rock paper scissors configuration, in that each class is a counter to another. Melee creatures deal more damage to ranged creatures, but are vulnerable to flyers, which in turn are countered by ranged units. It's a simple and elegant system. The more adept you become at it, the less personally involved you'll be in the battles. Some creatures have special abilities like creating protective magical barriers or stunning opponents. Personally, I didn't find them that essential, at least in the single player campaign, but I'm sure they play a larger role in multiplayer. Now, just because you're a squishy wizard, it doesn't mean you can't have any fun. While many of the spells fall in the support category like healing and speed up, the game does offer a decent variety of god-specific offensive abilities, like creating earthquakes and raining swarms of frogs over enemies. It's worth mentioning that Sacrifice offers a huge variety of spells and creatures. Once you choose to work with a god, you get their selection of abilities and minions for the rest of the campaign. So by simply playing mercenary and changing your allegiance between missions, you can build a varied arsenal of powers and critters from multiple gods. I like this system. It keeps things fresh and it ensures that you'll have something new to play with at the start of each mission. You won't get to see everything in one playthrough though. There is a cutoff point in the campaign where you're forced to make a decision and align with only 2 gods. So the campaign has great replay value given the various combinations of spells and creatures you can get. Overall, I've enjoyed my time with Sacrifice. The combat has a lot more depth than I let on, but the beauty in Sacrifice is uncovering its numerous layers on your own. As for the negatives, I wish the gods were a bit more developed, but given the small size of the team and novel concept of the gameplay, I understand some corners had to be cut. If you wanna try Sacrifice for yourself, it's just $9 on GOG, which is great value considering the strategic depth of the gameplay and the entertaining campaign. That's it for today. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.